Claire, before we get started, whether that's, is that Prince or Jimi Hendrix there?
It's not Claire Mayo.
Oh, that's not Claire?
No, it's some other attorney in my office.
Okay,
Mayor, we're live, Mayor.
that's good.
Okay. Well, I'd like to invite everyone to our first, well, it's not our first public forum, but it's our first public feedback forum of our Police Review Committee. For, I guess, about the last 6 weeks, month to 6 weeks, we've had a very dedicated group of volunteers made up of community members, community business members, our police department, our administration, our elected officials in Irvington, and we're discussing our police department. I think we looked at this as an opportunity to improve our police department from both the public's perspective as well as from the officers' perspective. I think, speaking for myself, I found our officers' participation invaluable, and that's everyone from, our current chief, our future chief, down to the rank and file. I think, frankly, many of the rank and file comments have been, equally or more important than the chief and the lieutenant who's going to be our chief. No offense to them, but I actually, frankly, just talk to them more. So it's great to get the perspective of people on the ground. And that kind of leads us to tonight, which is, we want to get the perspective of residents, positive and negative. Frankly, I expect to have largely positive response. This isn't something that we're trying to fix a broken police department. I think we're trying to take an excellent police department and make it even better. I think often we don't know what the public thinks. I think the police and DPW and the library, for that matter, kind of operate. And we only hear on real outlying things, either wonderful things wonderful interactions people have or horrible interactions. So, I think this is, probably one of the most crucial pieces is getting public feedback. Obviously, a large part of that public feedback is the ongoing survey. If you haven't yet had a chance to fill out the survey, we've had over 800 responses, which is tremendous. If we had had 500 at the end, I would have been thrilled, I think. So to have that many already is great. We kind of anybody from kind of middle school age on up. You don't have to live in Irvington. You don't have to go to Irvington schools, but if you visit Irvington, if you have an interest in Irvington, we want to hear from you. So along those lines, tonight we have our first forum where, really this group that's been working hard on reviewing policies and, wellness of officers and a million different things we've been working on. We're really here tonight just to listen to what's concerning you, what you're happy with, what you want to change, what you hope never changes, whatever's on your mind, we want to hear tonight. And that's really what this forum is all about. We're not going to really have any hard and fast rules, but similar to our regular meetings, we have a 3-minute time limit, or, people say I don't enforce that hard enough sometimes, but if you can try to keep your remarks to about 3 minutes and let everyone speak once before, you go again. So we're happy to have you, kind of jump to the back of the line and speak again. But we don't know how many people are looks like there's about 11 so far. But we don't know how many people are going to come on and share their opinions and thoughts. What we'll do is we'll have you just raise your hand, which you can hit the raise hand button, and we'll call on you, and we'll go from there. But before we do that, I would like to, I also want to say, for those of you just tuning in for the first time, this isn't my committee as mayor. This isn't my fellow board members committee. It's not Larry's committee, Larry Schaffler of the Village Administrators. It's not the police department's committee. It's everyone's committee. So I typically take a step back. Tonight, I just wanted to welcome everybody as a familiar face, but I've kind of let, this be run by, the community, by the people that have volunteered for this committee. And I'm just one small voice on this committee. And my voice is no more important in this issue than your voice, which we hope you hear tonight. So I guess without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mayo Bartlett and Maria Imperial, who've been our very capable and able leaders in this. They are not Irvington residents, so they kind of have a very impartial view of everything. They both have tremendous experience in leading discussions, and Mayo actually worked on the county police review committee. And we've really been lucky to have both of them leading us through this process and keeping us on task. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mayo and Maria, and I'll mute myself.
Mayor, I have to thank you. It's been so far a tremendous pleasure working with you. And I want to thank you and as well as the village government for your vision, because you've taken a number of initiatives prior to this executive order from Governor Cuomo to look at the village of Irvington and to try to take steps to make it the best village it can possibly be. I think that that's tremendously important. And I want to also follow on your comments regarding the work that we've been able to do with our law enforcement partners. And I have to thank the chief and Lieutenant Pignatelli, as well as all of the members of the Irvington Police Department who have taken it upon themselves to work with us largely on their own time, and who have shared a tremendous amount of their experience and have been very open and great partners. So we've been very, very fortunate to have them work with us, as well as members of the community and other stakeholders in Irvington who have been willing to give of their time. And we've spent a lot of time over the last couple of months reviewing all of the policies and protocols of the Irvington Police Department. And I'll just go very briefly into the executive order, which largely is why we are doing this work. And following the death of George Floyd, Governor Cuomo issued Executive Order 203, which required all of the municipalities that have their own police departments to review those departments and to look at what works well, what are they not doing, and what perhaps could they be doing better. And so I have to say that working with Irvington, we've taken that challenge as a way to determine how we can make the Irvington Police Department the best it can possibly be, and how we can help the village as well as the department partner with each other and strengthen relationships, strengthen bonds, improve policies and protocol. And the one thing that I really want us to stress and focus on is the reimagining component, because when Governor Cuomo talked about looking at the police departments, there certainly is an element of reform, but there's also a tremendous element which sometimes doesn't get as much attention, which is the reimagining component. And we have taken it upon ourselves to try to reimagine what the Irvington Police Department can be. And if you would just imagine what an automobile was, in the 1960s, and compare that to what an automobile is today. So you may have had a tremendous vehicle in the 60s, but you don't want to stop there. You want to always continue to improve and make it the best that it can be. So we realized that Irvington is a unique village, and that we're going to tailor some of what we do specifically to deal with Irvington. And we also recognize that there are some things that other departments do that are bigger or sometimes even smaller that we can benefit from. So we're looking at best practices. And the executive order asks us to look at staffing. It asks us to look at the training that police undergo. How do we recruit officers? What are the qualifications for officers? What is the diversity within a department? And then we also look at what are the policies and procedures, and how do we put in place real transparent mechanisms that would hold officers accountable when the officers are not adhering to the policies and procedures. So these are all things that we've been looking at. But in addition, we've expanded to look at the concept of wellness, and that encompasses both the officer wellness as well as the overall wellness of our community. And when we say our community, I want to thank all of the members of the task force, because we've tried to be as broad in that definition as possible, with the understanding that not everybody has to be a citizen or a resident of Irvington to be impacted by the police department, and vice versa. So we wanted to make sure that we comprehensively include the public in our effort to look at what the Irvington Police Department is doing and what they should be doing. And I will say that along the way, we've learned that the department's doing a lot of things that many of us had no idea that they were doing. And a lot of the things that they're doing are really phenomenal. And as we look at transparency, we're looking at ways to accentuate that as well and make sure people are aware of the great things that the department's doing, quite often that it doesn't have to do. And then we're also considering ways that we might be able to work with other types of professionals, whether it's mental health professionals, as well as being able to partner with some of our neighboring communities. So with that being said, I thank you very much, and we look forward to any comments or suggestions you may have, because that will help us to also have a better idea of what exactly the community believes should exist and what the police should be in Irvington. Thank you.
Okay, so if anybody from the that's dialed in to speak tonight would like to speak, you can raise your hand by hitting the raise your hand button down at the bottom right, I believe.
And also, just a bit of housekeeping. So if you're called in on a phone, to raise your hand is *9. So. Okay.
And Jeffy Holmes to lead it off.
Unmute. Got to learn to unmute, right?
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much to the village government, to the board, and the mayor, and the administration, but also the committee that's been working on this with our police force. We're so grateful for your careful consideration and the great amount of time you put into this. It's such an important topic because obviously a community can be fractured in minute little tiny fractions, little tiny hurts. And the police force, actually, when you think about it, is a community protection and community facilitation operation. It seems to me that in a place like Irvington, you know, we don't need a sort of a police force that is sort of highly defensive. We need a police force that's proactive in building community. And I am so interested. I filled out my survey. I encourage everyone in Irvington, fill out your survey. It's really important. The police and the village need to understand your experience and what you want of our police. And I personally would love to see a proactive community building aspect in our police force, although I know that that would require possibly different training. And this is where Mayo is, needed, because you have the bigger picture of what happens with police forces in different cities and towns and municipalities, and the range of police training. And I think police in Irvington, I would hope that they would be trained not just in protecting against violence, but in actually helping neighbors navigate friction. That would be my hope. And I thank you all for your efforts. I'm very grateful for our village. I think we have a great community spirit and a police force that really wants to serve us in the best way possible. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anybody else want to raise their hand? Otherwise, this could be a long meeting. I'm gonna have Mike Toolin start telling stories about his high school glory days. That's how he dialed in, so.
You don't want to hear that, Brian. You don't want to hear that.
I've heard it enough, I guess, but I don't know if everyone else has.
I haven't heard it. I could stand to hear it.
If you tell the story, Mike, you waive the rights. We all have equal access to it.
It's all true. It's all true. At least what I remember of it.
Brian, let's hear some of your high school Spanish.
De ninguna manera. That's my favorite phrase. But we actually have I have to say my lack of Spanish in high school was my fault, not your wife's fault. I learned more in my trip to Ecuador, where no one spoke English, than I did in 4 or 5 years of high school. And then later on, as I got older, we went to Spain to study, and it was very hard because I was with a bunch of 20-year-olds and I felt like an idiot, but it was fun though. Still working.
Brian, si quieres, vamos a solamente hablar en español.
Se puede hacer.
Se puede, es posible.
Es muy posible.
Es a mejor.
Ajá, sigue.
You want me to get my wife to translate that for you, Brian?
Please, yeah, she can type it to me over here and make me look smart. Make sure she spells everything phonetically, though.
No, español, Brian, por favor.
All right.
Janice, sing us a song in the interlude here. Keep us going.
There we go, Leola. Let me see if I can. Larry had to step off for a second. And I don't know if I guess I am not an administrator. I assume you're not either, Mayo?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Maria?
Larry will be right back.
Okay.
I think you unmuted me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
thank you.
Larry probably did it.
Oh,
Very
great. And it's nice to see you all. I'm sorry that you can't see me.
No, but it looks like your picture looks like where I want to be, to be honest. Maybe speaking Spanish poorly.
Oh, yes, it's Puerto Rico. How did you know?
Have a good eye.
Oh, great. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of richness in this, and I think there's probably two things you could predict from me and what I might say. One is it's always going to be environment related, and the other is that I like win-wins. And so, first of all, I just want to give a shout out to the incredible protection. And John Dawson, I see here, was a fellow ambulance corps volunteer. Brian, you too, actually, way back when, 7 years in Irvington, I volunteered on the Irvington Ambulance Corps. The most incredible thing was the police would arrive first on the scene, and they'd make sure that things were safe for us to enter. You know, there was nothing that we're going to be injured by, you know, running into somebody's house to help them. And boy, that was so comforting, and brought the AED machine. If someone had had a heart attack, they'd be right there. And I think that's still a practice that is just so valuable to our community. And just as a comfort, you know, as a volunteer myself, to know that we had always the police there arriving on the scene. So pretty cool. And then on the environmental side, one thing, and the win-win sort of build back better, I think the example of the ambulance corps support is something we absolutely need to keep, and many, many things the police do, we need to keep, and other things we could improve. And what I'd like to see is, you know, for us, and particularly for the younger generations, environmental threats are one of our biggest threats and risks. And so we need to have every department, everyone in our village focus on this and lower our environmental impact. One thing that our Irvington police did do is I brought to their attention that cars were idling outside the police department. They were running with no one in them. And that made no sense to me. That was very polluting and expensive to run the gas like that. And so when I told our police force about that, I noticed a change, and it wasn't happening so much. So I really think it's wonderful that our police, you know, listen to community input. One thing I'd like to ask environmentally is there are laws currently on the books to protect our environment that aren't being enforced. So I wondered if I might ask that right away we start enforcing no idling laws. Westchester County law is no idling more than 3 minutes. And I am forever reminding people not to get out of their cars when they're still running, or sit in their cars for more than 3 minutes with the car running. Westchester gets an F every year for air quality. We've got to stop this behavior, and we need our police to help enforce that. Also, the gas powered leaf blower law. Our police need to enforce that. There are violations all the time, and yet I don't know that there have been any citations since we've had the law. So I'd really like to ask for that too, and that protects our workers from the pollution that they have to endure, our community, and the earth. So, you know, I'd like to ask for enforcement of that. And the other is one great thing that we can partner together on as a community and with our police is for reconfiguring Broadway in a safe way where cars will come through easily and efficiently, and people can walk and bike safely, and there are statistically fewer accidents. There's already a proposed design on the table at route9active.org. And I've been part of the committee for the Village of Irvington for 3 years on that to look at those possibilities and make recommendations. And so I'd like to partner with our police on that, because traffic safety, speeding, you know, naturally the reconfiguration would cause people to drive closer to the speed limit. And it would also keep pedestrians safer and cyclists, and fewer car accidents result from these kinds of design changes. So the public safety traffic aspect, you know, could also be improved by partnering on these types of things. So I think I'm probably at my 3 minutes, but thank you very much for allowing me to give input.
Thank you. Mayo and I were just talking about how since there aren't too many people waiting, where I could be a little bit relaxed on my time limits. But for now, you can speak as long as you'd like for now. But anybody else like to say something? Oh, we have, yep, there we go. I think Mary's coming up. Yep, Larry already put her on. Perfect. Hey, Mary, looks like you've been authorized to speak. I think you just have to unmute yourself now. There you
Hi
go.
there.
All right.
Hi. I wasn't just dialing in tonight to hear. I wasn't planning to speak, but since nobody's speaking, I mean, there's opportunity. I thought I might as well
We
jump
appreciate
in.
that.
Yeah, I've lived in Irvington since 1989, and I love this town. I also have 3 police officers in my circle of family and friends. So I'm, you know, I am also part of an organization called Surge Westchester, which is showing up for racial justice. And we are a chapter that started in 2016. And I've also been having conversations about race as a parent. That's how I started to do this since 2012. So I've talked about race a lot, and that's my concern. I'm happy to, I'm glad that thank you everybody, because I listened to a recording of the last meeting you all had just to get a sense of, and this is tough work, and I appreciate everybody doing this work. I really do. My concern is, you know, we're a community. I raised my kids here, and my concern is we are pretty much a very white community. And that's what worries me. And I think any community like ours, which is sort of, we have very different people in the community, economic, but I worry about the racial, dealing with race and how to talk about it. And as a community, I know there's efforts and there's meetings, and it's great. I think we're starting things, and I'm really happy about that. But that's my concern about the police department having a way, and it's really hard because the police are, to me, you know, they're on the street, they're in there, dealing with a lot of the issues that are already part of our society that we're trying to deal with. So it's a really hard thing. So my concern, and not to go on, is if we can create some way to really have community conversations. And yes, we all have bias, but there's also a racial dynamic when you're predominantly a white community that I think we need to create conversation about. And that's what's concerning me as an Irvington resident. And I am wanting this community to be as welcoming as possible to people, because as beautiful it is on the river and I'm safe here and all that, there's something sort of missing. And I think it goes throughout the whole community, where it comes from, and that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for being willing to raise your little blue hand. Anybody else? And Jaffe Holmes.
So sorry, everybody, to speak again, really super quick. Mary reminded me that I also actually wanted to mention that I think the role of the police in the school needs to be seriously looked at, just to make sure, because what I read on Black at Irvington, was disturbing, and I think that needs to be super carefully looked at with the school district, of course, but that's the big one. So thank you very much. I just wanted to put that one in there.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Lisa again.
Hello, thanks so much for taking my comment, and thank you for convening this meeting. I also, like Mary, was planning to listen and not to talk. I have a lot of interest in hearing what my fellow Irvingtonians want to say, and I also have kids in the background. I'm sorry about that. But I wanted to piggyback to what both Mary and Anne were just talking about, and to say that as a white resident of Irvington, I don't have firsthand experiences of bias in the police force, but I've also read the Black at Irvington accounts and have heard other stories from fellow parents who are people of color that suggest to me that bias is definitely an issue. And I just want to say it's an issue that affects all of us, not just those of us who are people of color, because it has a way of poisoning the well and changing the way that I perceive the police department as well. Because when I have positive interactions with Irvington police officers, which I do when I wave to them in the street and they wave back, I wonder if I'm benefiting from white privilege, and I wonder if I'm being treated better than some of my neighbors. And it makes the interaction less genuine, and it serves to sort of erode my trust also that the police department is a force in our community that I can fully trust because of my concern about bias. So I just wanted to say that it's something that really affects everybody in the way that Mary said, there's something that's missing. And part of that is diversity in our town, and part of that is also diversity on the police force. And that's the second point I really wanted to bring up, that I care a lot about the hiring of officers of color on the police force. And I think that would send an enormously important message, and also have the effect of bringing those perspectives onto the police force that feel like they're currently missing. So I really appreciate, again, your convening this. And I wanted to say again that I have had personally very positive experiences with police officers. So I want to commend the village for everything that you have done to create that, and all the officers I've interacted with. And just to say that there is this other piece that concerns me, and I would love to see the village and the department work on more. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your taking the time.
Thank you. I appreciate you speaking up. And Tom Thacker has raised his hand. Look at that. We're picking up momentum now. Tom.
Here, I'm on now, right?
You sure are.
Oh, okay. Well, I wasn't planning on speaking either, but I wanted to just tune in and listen, because I wanted to hear what all the residents said. But I want to echo one of the things that Lisa said regarding having the police force recruit police officers of color. I think that that should be a priority moving forward, that we have some representation of people of color on the force. So I would like that to be a priority of the new police chief. And secondly, I just wanted to say that the sharing of data, particularly in regards to motorists and pedestrian stops, is really the key to transparency. I think it's really, really important that that data be public and be in the public record. So I would like to have access to it and know exactly what's going on Broadway and other places, to make sure that there isn't a form of racial profiling going on. In regards to the police department in general, I think we've got a great police department. They've always been very, very courteous when I've called and responsive. So I think in that sense, we're in very, very good shape. But I do strongly believe in the necessity of more public transparency. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Since we are filling time, I guess the one thing, since I've been on the board, and Connie and I have both been on the board since 2009, diversity of all sorts has been a priority, whether it's male, female, whether it's racial, whether it's Spanish speaking. It's been a priority for us. We have discussed quite a bit about the limitations of the way, the system works. We only take the top 3 people on the local list and all those things that make it difficult, but it has been a priority for us. We are looking at the Spanish speaking list, and we are trying to, find diversity that reflects our community. It took us a long time to be able to find a female officer, and we finally were able to do that. But, I think we will be able to, we keep looking, but, diversity is actually hard to find on the list. So it makes our jobs harder, but, we have that shared goal, and not just diversity for diversity's sake, but because, it is important to have, everyone feel included when they see their police department. And, we can still find the best person. I think that's the other thing is we're not going to find someone who's unqualified. It's always about qualifications first. I know people have brought that up to me, and it's not about that. It's just not necessarily taking the first person. And I think a lot of people have assumed that's what we've done, or it's someone that or something like that. But it's just a difficult thing to do just because of the way, the system works, frankly.
And Brian, you know that this committee has taken the board's resolution on their desire to have a more diverse workforce. And they spent a lot of time integrating that policy into what we hope will be changes to the police department manual in terms of recruiting. I think they did a good job with integrating that, and the board will be pleased to see that when you do see it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say that, it's not just the police department that we want to, ensure is representative of the community, but it's the library, it's the rec department, it's, your office, it's everywhere in the village. So the police department obviously is the one that is probably the most kind of politically charged or something, but, to me, it's just as important to have a diverse, library as it is as a police department. It should just be the way business is done. So I think we're all committed to that. Kathleen McDonald. Thank you for raising your hand, so I don't have to talk anymore.
Looks like you're still muted.
There you go.
She's unmuted, but.
Yep. This won't count against your 3 minutes.
Kathleen, we're not hearing you, so I'm not sure. It looks like you're unmuted, but so I'm not sure what the problem is. Yeah, maybe we can try again later.
Yeah. Just keep her on the panel and until someone else wants to speak.
Yeah. Hold on.
Lisa would like to speak again.
Hello, I'm just going to take one more minute of your time to
Sure.
say that I'm curious to know sort of what, and this is not something I'm asking you to answer now, but I'm just curious about the process for trying to find more diverse candidates, diverse in terms of gender as well. As you mentioned, Brian, and diverse in terms of having more people of color on the force, because I'm sure that the village is taking those efforts seriously, but I know in so many contexts, it can be hard to break through sort of the obvious first rung of candidates. Not to analogize too much, but I'm on a nonprofit board and we're trying to recruit more diverse candidates, and it's really making us reflect on who it is that we know and how, you know, we're predominantly white women now, and the people who come to us, the people who respond to our queries are predominantly white women as well. And so I recognize that it's very challenging to break through the sort of homogeneity in who comes to us first. But I just want to really encourage our village and our police department to put the utmost efforts into finding those candidates. I'm sure that there are very, very qualified, diverse candidates who are out there. So qualifications shouldn't be, you know, a concern. And I would just love to see us, you know, take that extra step and make really serious efforts, understanding that diversity is, you know, a goal in and of itself. It's an intrinsic value that we all hold. And so we really want to see the village pursue that kind of that goal with great effort and perseverance. Thank you so much for the time.
Sure. You know, I don't know, Mayo, if you want to maybe talk about how the lists work, you know, I can do it as well. But, you know, I would just say, Lisa, that the vast majority of police officers that are hired are through the quote unquote lists, which are, you know, you basically get ranked based on how you do on a civil service exam. And then we can only pick from the top 3 people on the list. And there's a little asterisk on that if people are tied and strange things like that. But basically, if we get a list and the top 3 candidates are not people of color, there's nothing we can do other than not hire anyone. You know, so it's in a lot of ways, our hands are tied. The only other way we can do it is if there are transfers. And Mayo, I'll let you correct me when I'm done, but through transfers. But transfers are you know, kind of, you can't, it's really bad form to go and recruit to try to steal someone from another police department that is, you know, typically paid for someone's training or something like that. There's a big issue with White Plains a few years ago that, you know, they pay a little less. So a lot of the villages were hiring away their officers. And there was, you know, there were threats of lawsuits and things like that. So it's kind of it's a very, the whole way the civil service, you know, process is set up really ties our hands, except if someone, you know, actually raises their hand and says, I really want to work there from another department. So it's not so much, you know, like for something like the rec department or, you know, other departments that don't have, say, you know, strict civil service, you know, to have a part-time staff in the rec is something that we could, you know, go to people or, you know, try to recruit, as you said. But for, you know, the police department, for, you know, there's actually, it's not just the police department, there's actually a lot of roles that are on in the village that are on civil service tests, but, you know, it does tie our hands quite a bit. So I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit or make corrections where necessary.
No, Mayor, I think that you really gave a good overview of some of the challenges and some of the things that we're working on, and ideally we'll have a draft report reasonably soon that we'll be able to put out in more detail and invite you back to comment on. But we're looking at really the need to change the New York State Civil Service Law, which will expand the pool of candidates that we're able to choose from. And we're also looking at possible proposals to change some of the qualifications so we can look at things that are not currently considered when we go to hire, and also making sure that the test is given more often. And that'll benefit everybody. So it'll allow for a greater pool for all of the local municipalities to choose from. And I think that in the process, there are some other things that we can do in terms of community engagement, where we will be able to go out and work with people who are in the community already and try to stress the benefits of a career in law enforcement. So there are a number of different things we're looking at as a task force. And again, we haven't voted on all of them, so it would be premature of me to say that we have a position with respect to any particular one, but we will have all of them in the preliminary report and the draft. And again, we really would ask everybody who's here, even if you don't participate today, to consider coming back and maybe sharing your opinions And again, there may be ways for you to submit feedback without necessarily speaking directly today also. So please consider doing that. And absolutely, if you haven't already completed the survey, please do so, because I think we have very good participation right now when we engage in this type of process, especially when we're not in person. It's hard for us all to even know who's here. We don't see everybody where we would if it was an auditorium. But it's important to hear your feedback, because that's going to really help us as we start to look at our recommendations.
So it looks like Kathleen has her hand up again, so we'll try this one again. There we go.
Yes, I'm sorry, I'm back. I hope you can hear me this time.
Loud and clear. It was, thank
good.
you for
Thank
trying
you.
again. No problem.
Thank you for your patience before. I appreciate it. You actually, Brian, I believe you addressed, and I stayed on because I just wanted to make a comment, but you did address something that I was going to ask you also to do. I actually just retired from the criminal justice system about 1.5 years ago, working for the Manhattan DA's office most of my life, and then the court system. So I wondered if the community was aware that that the way usually you get hired, it's not just by kind of the luck of the draw. There's a list. And I was just going to ask one of you to explain that. As a person who has found herself on a list in the past, it's there for a reason. It's there for, so that the best candidate is not picked. It's not somebody's relative. Again, I've been in the criminal justice system a very long time. So I just want to thank you for explaining that to the community, because I'm not sure everybody always knows that that's how somebody gets hired. I'm close to 60. I've lived in Irvington since I was 15, lived here a very long time. Some of the officers on the force I went to school with. Some of them I just know because my father is retired from the police department in Manhattan, and they know him very well. And I just want to say, probably the best bunch of people I've ever met. Their service to the community, I think, is just excellent. And I wanted to make sure that, I try to, post on their Instagram, thank them for all the things that they've done for us in this community, particularly with COVID. Particularly, I have an elderly parent nearby. They've helped me out a lot with him. And, I just want to make sure that, you guys are aware that we do appreciate them. We thank them for their service. They're a terrific group. And I just wanted to make sure, unfortunately, sometimes I listened to another meeting and it upset me because the caller made a comment about her car being moved because she felt the officer was saying something against her nationality. And I thought to myself, it's interesting how that was your first thought. That bothered me, because I think if it was me, I would have liked to say, oh, wait a minute, am I in the wrong spot? Am I in an illegal zone? And maybe that's why the officer asked me to move. So again, I just want to thank our police for what they do. I welcome the new captain, I believe it is, that's going to be there. And I just wanted to thank you all for your time, and I hope to listen future to these other forums.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. And thanks for dealing with Zoom.
Thank you. And thank you for your patience. Good night. Be safe.
Absolutely. Good night. Bye-bye. We did have one question here. Diversity and inclusion in the police force. This is from Govert. Diversity and inclusion in the police force and in the village are joined at the hip. I'm convinced that police officers prefer serving communities they can relate to. So we will probably get more diverse candidates if the population of Irvington becomes more diverse. And that will probably only happen when a more diverse people considering Irvington as a place to live see a more diverse police force. Chicken and the egg, we need to focus on both at the same time, diversity in the community and the force. I don't think I can disagree with that. I think that's it kind of goes along the same thinking of, we want to have diversity in our library and our rec department and our, village staff and our village board. I can't disagree with that. Anybody else? There we go. Mary again.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for letting me speak again. I was
Sure.
listening, and diversity, it is important, diversity. I am concerned when organizations want to just focus on diversity, that is a solution, because it's just more than having people from different races on boards or in companies. It's really sort of top down. I'm glad to see the new chief, Pignatelli. Now I know who he is. So I think, as you're taking over as the new chief, I think it's a great opportunity to set, not that anything is bad that you're coming from, but I mean, it's a great opportunity to sort of have a reimagining. I love that. Whoever said reimagining. I think that's a great way to look at the police, and if there's a way to take any kind of defensiveness out, because we are human beings, we get defensive. We're all good people. Everybody in this Zoom is good people. And I'm sure the police department are good people. We're all good. So the whole thing of just this thing of diversity, I get concerned about. It's more than just diversity, because what if you don't get that diverse police officer, or in the next couple of months, or what does that mean? It goes beyond just having a diverse board or company. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
To think about. Thank you.
I think what I'll say to that is, from sitting on the board of trustees that kind of sets the tone, I think it was important for us to adopt a policy that talks about how diversity is important. I think you're right that, just having, I think tokenism is probably the bad side of the coin. And that's definitely not what we want. We want it to be similar to, I actually would equate it to how we have our budget process here, where, it becomes inbred in you that we have to watch every dime, not just during budget season, not just, when we want to, have a nice proclamation about diversity is important on Juneteenth or something. But it becomes the way that you live and breathe, valuing diversity, valuing diverse opinions. And, I think for the way it practically works for me, or the way I see it working for the village, is that saying that, well, we only have 3 people on the list, there's nothing we can do, isn't where we stop. If we have a great candidate for the library, that, for the children's librarian, and it happens to be a white male, that we don't just say, oh, this person's great, let's just hire that person. Maybe you say, I think this person's great, we'll definitely consider them, but maybe let's see if there's a few more candidates as well. So I think it does, you're right. You can't always say that we're going to be able to hire a perfectly diverse force and, have one of each ethnicity and race. But I think if you change the way you think, and, talking to Frank, I think Frank is one of the deepest thinkers I've ever met anywhere, which, is probably not the stereotype of police officers. But I actually think we have a lot of cerebral police officers in Irvington, as well as our DPW. I don't know if you've ever talked to some of our DPW staff, but they have diversity of thought, if not in skin tone. But but I think it's a very interesting concept that you bring up, and I can't disagree with what you're saying, that it's not just about hiring someone because of their race or religion or sex. It has to be something that people buy in on, and I think that our department heads have, for the most part, all bought in on it. And I think we see it from everything from our theater, which we're lucky to have a theater that has, really embraced diversity, to a police department that I think is, squarely behind it. And, as supportive of the idea as we are, because I think, there's practical reasons too. A Spanish speaking officer you don't have to hire a translator. A female officer, if you arrest a female, you don't have to bring in someone from another department to, do the searches and things like that. So there's practical reasons for diversity, as well as kind of, bigger societal reasons too. So I think it just has to become a mindset, like our budget process, as opposed to just tokenism, for sure. I feel like everyone else, I really wasn't planning on speaking at all tonight. Now I've said too much, but the silence is deafening. Only an hour and 7 minutes to go.
That's before intermission, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the only thing worse than my Spanish is my singing voice, so I'm not going to sing.
So Mayo, not to put you on the spot, but maybe we can outline just a little bit about what the next steps are in terms of the future, the drafting of a report, release of that. I'm not sure you went through the full timeline of what we envision here.
Sure. We have to have a final report that is submitted to the governor by April 1st. And we need to have a draft report, but part of that draft report is going to be the public comment. So we're getting feedback from the survey, but also through this process. And it may feel tedious, but I'm happy with the participation we've had so far. And I hope we'll get some more people before we conclude. What we'll do is we'll look at the different policies. We'll look at the manual to determine whether there are any changes that are necessary. We'll look at shared service opportunities where we might be able to work with other municipalities so that we can enhance what we're able to do. And also so that we can be as efficient as possible in terms of cost, but also in terms of what we're asking of the individual officers from Irvington. We will probably have some recommendations that we will submit directly to the state because it'll require state action in order for us to implement it. And then there'll be opportunities possibly for us to even partner with other entities so that if we have a recommendation to the state, we may be able to join with others. So it's not just our voice, but we can partner with others who think that what we're proposing makes sense. So these are all the things that we're looking at right now. And I'll just share the fact that when we're looking at best practices, we're not limiting it to what's happening in Westchester County or in New York State, or even in the country. We're trying to be as broad as we can and look at what's working elsewhere. And if we find something that's working well in another country, be able to bring that back here. So if we do our job well, Irvington PD will be the model for other police departments. And not just for other departments that are similarly sized, but maybe for other departments, period. And you see that happening where we've looked at Project Able, which came out of the Georgetown Law School. But it really is, it's the genesis of a person who had a lot of vision, this guy, Jonathan Aroney, who was a lawyer down in New Orleans and got involved with the New Orleans Police Department. He was asked to be the federal monitor. And this was after they had had a really, really difficult chapter in their history following Hurricane Katrina. And I think it's just a great success story. And by no means are we coming from that type of a background, thankfully. But it was an opportunity for them to take a really struggling and challenged and heavily criticized department and make it really a shining department and make them really, a department that other large departments want to emulate. So there they looked at officer wellness, they looked at ways you could partner that and make that also a component of community wellness. So we want to be able to take the best parts of other departments and ideally make them our own. So we're going to have a draft report. I don't necessarily think that the number of pages is so important as the content, but we're going to take the time to go through that and make sure that we have recommendations that are going to serve the public as well as the department well. We're looking at ways that we can strengthen the bond between the department as well as the public. And there are a lot of ways that are really interesting. I think I'm very excited about the potential in Irvington. And then ideally, we will follow on the action that was already taken by the Irvington government. The fact that the efforts that have been discussed today were initiated well before the executive order, well before we had to come to do this under Executive Order 203 is very important. So it already has presented us with a framework that ideally will fit nicely into. And again, looking at and having had an opportunity to work with Frank, I just got finished telling him I really look forward to seeing what the department's going to be in the future, and to see how we can take steps to improve upon where we are right now, with the understanding that, 20 years from now, someone else is going to come in and say, hey, look, ideally, we're doing a great job, but how can we improve again? And that should always be our goal, no matter what we're doing, is how can we improve upon where we are? And ideally, the one thing that I've really been pleased to see with our task force, and we don't always agree, and anybody who does always agree, you have to kind of be a little suspect of, because that's just not the way things work. But I do believe that everybody is approaching it from the same vantage point of leaving this village and the department better than it was when we got here. And so that children who are born today will have a much brighter future and will have a better relationship and have clear expectations of what they'd like to see from the police and vice versa. So we're going to put all of that into a document, because executive orders are wonderful. But the reality is that when the person who issues the executive order is no longer in power, then quite often the executive order goes away. So we're looking at structural changes that would be able to stand the test of time, and of course be reviewed and reevaluated for their efficiency and their effectiveness. But we'll be able to put things in place that are procedurally valid, that will be able to be relied on, and that will also make it easier for the officers to have a clear understanding of what the manual says and what their rules and regulations are.
I'll add something else kind of related. We obviously have a deadline with the state, but I think we feel that this work is so important that we have an artificial deadline in some ways to get a report to the state. But there's going to definitely be some issues, some items, whether it's a more in-depth survey, whatever it is, that as a village we want to do this right. We want Frank. We want to empower Frank to help Frank. We want Frank to help us to make things better, and the whole department. So I think that if this goes on for years or indefinitely, that's fine with us as well. It might not be all the same people, because that sometimes happens. But I think that I think we put together a really good cross section of people on this committee. I think it's important, as Mayo said, that we don't always agree, that we have different points of view. That we, included, I think it was crucially important that we included the people most affected, which were obviously the officers, with so much of this, and to hear their experiences, so I think that, this is a long game for us, even though we have a very tight deadline and we've had to front load so many meetings. And that's where I really, take my hat off to this committee, is that, we don't have an indefinite amount of time before we have to put in a report, which has steps before we can put in the report. So it's been, and a lot of it was during the holidays. It was during, there's never a good time to do things, but it was definitely during a tough time. And to have so much great participation across the board has been really tremendous. But, we don't have to end our work on April 1st. We hope to continue this, in some form, after that kind of deadline has come and gone. So I just want to throw that out there as well, especially for people who might have an interest in this and want to be involved. There's probably going to be a chance into the future to be involved in this if you care about your police department. And since no one's raised their hand while I was talking, I'm going to share a kind of a conversation I had with an officer a couple of days ago, which was, so much of what the police does, day to day, in performing their duties, no one really knows. And, I think the more interaction people have, typically the better, I believe their view of the police department is. I think there is a lot of perceptions about law enforcement in general. And again, I'm not saying, that, we don't have any problems in Irvington at all, but I do think that, the more community interaction we can have, the better it's going to reflect on the department, because I think that's what they want. They want to shine light on it. They might not agree on all the reporting and different things, but, I think for the most part, they want people to see how they're interacting, see what they're doing. And that was from from an officer I was speaking with. So to me, it gave me great hope that that's the view of the department, not just the view of the board of trustees that wants to have more transparency. So, I think that it's, the more interpersonal reactions we have, between our residents, our visitors, our guests in the village, the better it's going to reflect on the department. So,
And I just feel that I would like to just follow on what you said, Mayor, that from the very first meeting we had, I just have to commend Chief Cerrone because he made it crystal clear that his goal was to find out as much about how the department is perceived by the community as possible. And not everybody embraces that. And I think that it's critical to do so if we're going to be successful in what we're doing and if we're going to become the best we can be. It's easy for us to hear the things we want to hear. It's easy for us to talk to our fans. But if you hear someone who says, hey, I think maybe we could do it a little differently. And if you're willing to embrace that, well, those are the people who really go on to do great things. And I have to just mention that I just have had just a tremendous amount of respect for the manner in which all of our law enforcement partners who have worked with us have been willing and open to sometimes things that are new ideas, things that really police haven't had to do in the past. And they've been really willing to open up the department so that they can find out what people honestly feel. I think that's tremendously important. It's not something that we ought to overlook. So Chief, thank you very much for that.
Yeah, no, I think I'm glad you brought that up because it's something I wanted to bring up. And, even though we still have 55 minutes left, sometimes you forget. But, this is Chief Cerrone's last week as chief in law enforcement. And I can't imagine after being chief for so many years and being in law enforcement for 45 years that, that he would want to spend the last 2 months of his time as chief on a review panel that would potentially be critical of him. So I think he really did set a great tone early on at the very first meeting when he kind of said, I'm here to listen. And, I want to hear what people, how people think we can hear better, which he could have been very defensive or just not paid attention to his last, months in office. So I think we do owe him a large debt of gratitude for setting the right tone on these meetings early. So thank you, Chief Cerrone.
Absolutely.
And
Mayo, just want to say something. I want to thank you all for the kind words. I appreciate them. And this is what it should be. I agree with everything that's been discussed. Obviously, we don't agree fully on everything, but for the majority of the discussions, they've been good. We get an idea of what the police department is how it's viewed by the residents, which in years past, we've never had that. And it's a good time now to get this done and a good transition for soon to be chief of the department, Frank Pignatelli, for him to pick up the ball and lift that bar even further than it's been. And it's a welcome practice. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chief.
I also think it's important to say how the former Chief Cerrone has, he said, okay, listen, I can't do a lot going forward. I want to leave that to Frank. And Frank has stepped in. It's been a great transition so far between the two, and they work very well together. And it's been a pleasure for me to have both of them on this committee working with us.
Yeah, I think we're in good shape. And we have
Larry?
some.
We have a speaker.
Yeah.
I just wanted to let everybody know that I have developed an outline, a proposed outline for the report, just getting to the nitty gritty. And I know last night we spoke about the actual recommendations and the process. I don't know, Mayo, if you had a chance to speak with Copernicus about possibly using the app, because I think that would be very helpful to the process.
I'll speak with him tomorrow. Yep, so I'll talk to him tomorrow. I don't expect that there'll be any issue with it, though.
Okay, great. So what we're thinking is, because everyone on the committee has to vote on the recommendations, that will put all the recommendations into an app that everybody could access and then take the vote that way on the actual recommendations. And I also want to thank Chief Cerrone so much, and also everyone that's on this committee. I'm amazed by how much time people and the thoughtfulness of everyone. It's extremely impressive. And one takeaway that I heard tonight is, and I don't know how broad you want to make this, but it sounded like we're trying to reimagine the police department, but a number of people said we want to reimagine the town as well, and using this process as a way to make it broader. So I applaud that as well.
And we have Kelly Scott with her hand up. Thanks for waiting, Kelly.
No problem. Can you guys hear me? I'm at work, so.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Yep.
Good. Once again, everybody has spoken and has said this, but thank you guys to all of you that's taken time to be a part of this process. But I think one of the things that we have to be honest about, right, and look at is that the fact of it is, as much as we would love to say our police department is great, which I've had great encounters, and but there's been times that I've wondered and I've questioned things, and I've made that known. As an African American living in Irvington, I moved to Irvington last January, and then I made a little puddle. But one of the things I want to say is that during the protest and this past summer, there was definitely some bias there. And we can say no, and we can say what we want, and we can think what we want. But the reality of it is, I saw with my own eyes police officers clapping when the Blue Lives Matter rallies went through town. They didn't have that same energy at the protests for the Black Lives Matter. So what I'm asking and what I'm proposing is that it is important for us as community members, especially people of color, to know that you guys are behind us as law enforcement, especially in this moment like never before. And so when that happens, it speaks louder than the good that you do. I have to be honest. When you see applause happening because, whether it's a Trump rally or whatever, on the other side, but when you're at the other rallies, you're quiet, that has to be taken into account. That is an issue, that is a problem. And I think the one thing that was more disturbing, there was two parts to that. For me, because knowing law enforcement and being a part of a law enforcement agency in Louisiana, to be in your Class A's and applauding law enforcement, that's an issue. That's a big issue. And applauding these rallies that is really concerning. As now an Irvington resident, officially, and that I think we just have to look at it and look at it from all angles. While yes, this is a great thing that's happening, and like many of you have voiced tonight, it can't stop after this 3 months. Like, it can't be this period of time and then we let everything die because the evaluation is over and we get to keep funding. We must look deeper, and also think about the other side. When we're doing things, like, how would this be perceived? Because it's not even about, sometimes it's about optics. And the reality of it is, because nobody really knows the police department. I know I don't. I don't know many of them anyway. So when I see that tells me a couple things. I can't trust the police department in my own town. So that's just one of my concerns as a person of color. And I hope you guys moving forward would look and evaluate and make sure that those issues are resolved, that, especially while in uniform, that's not what the village does.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate you speaking up. Karen.
I just joined the meeting on my iPad because I was watching on my ancient PC because I can hear better and my ears are about 20 years older than the rest of me. But I simply wanted to say with Chief Cerrone leaving, many years ago, when he was just starting with the department, I was the court clerk in Irvington at that time. And I know that Chief Cerrone suffered a different kind of discrimination that I can't get into, of course. But I just wanted to thank him and the department, because he in particular has always conducted himself with such dignity and, as far as I could see, such inclusiveness. And I was so happy a couple of years ago, I think it was a Memorial Day, when our county legislator had buttons for those who had served previously in the military, who were also serving in the armed services in some way in our communities. And Chief Cerrone was one of those people who was also a veteran, but was serving obviously in a uniform at the present time. So as a long time, 50-year resident of this community, I simply wanted to thank him and all of our police for such a wonderful job that I think they do. I completed that census or that questionnaire this afternoon, and I just sent a note to one of my neighbors to do the same. So anyway, I thank you all for your service in this capacity, and I am so hopeful that it does bring results county-wide for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
While we have a little break here, I just want to say that I'll relay a little conversation I had with Chief Cerrone today. It has nothing to do with his retirement, by the way. He and I were talking about the survey, and what we both acknowledged as, you know, in our management roles here, and I'm sure Frank would agree, that we're looking forward to the feedback, to see those things that are being done well, and to see those things that need improvement, and then act on those things, and then circle back around, you know, 2 to 3 years from now and have another survey and see how much we've improved. And I think, you know, it's just a natural management thing that we'd want to do, and it's a nice tool to have. So there's not a bit of defensiveness in all of that. We want to learn and understand what those things are, and then work to improve them, and then see measurable results, you know, on the next survey that we do. So it was just an interesting conversation, but I know we shared the same thing that we're looking forward to, although he won't be in charge at that time, but we're both looking forward to it.
We could edit this part out, Larry. I'm about to call on Mike Morano to tell Mike's own stories, but
It may be too many, and we don't have enough time.
yeah, exactly. But we only have about 43 minutes left. So,
Well, I might as well tell you about the picture. Obviously, you see it's Rip Van Winkle there. I figured that's going to be my future retirement pose of keeping an eye on things.
there you go. I thought you were going to tell us how you drove him home after he came down from the Catskills.
Well, I can't tell you everything. And that was a couple of years back.
Yeah. When you ticketed, Washington Irving for galloping through town too fast. Because he was doing research for a book.
You got me on that one, man.
Yeah, I can't really tell old jokes with Frank.
Right.
He's gonna turn the tables on me.
No, there's going to be a good future going forward after we get done with the evaluations here and everything else that everybody's has put their input in on. And I see it's going to be a positive factor all the way, a win-win, as somebody else had said earlier. It is a win-win process for everybody.
I hope so.
Anyone else hearing the Jeopardy music? Because that's what I'm hearing. And if you haven't been hearing it, now you are, so you're welcome.
Thank you. Help fill the void.
Exactly.
Okay. You have a question? Yeah.
Not necessarily a question and not super important either, but I just wanted to share my experience. I've been a resident of Irvington for about 2 years, and not only was I new to Irvington, I was new to the United States when I first moved to Irvington. And I think one of the things that could really have helped me back then was some form of an explanation of how policing works in the United States, because it can be quite different from elsewhere in the world. And I guess being as close as we are to the metropolitan that is New York City, we should probably expect non-US citizens or non-US citizens to be arriving in Irvington and to maybe need or want a little help in terms of understanding how one engages with a police force, what their expectations of you are versus what your expectations of them should be, etc. So just maybe as a point of future improvement, maybe there can be some form of an introduction to village policing, and I guess also the village court. It certainly took me a long time to understand that when I did once get a fine, that I could actually go to the Irvington court and pay that off. And once you know it, it's a super simple thing to do. It's just that system doesn't exist at all in other places in the world that I've lived, and it would be good to have that type of information available.
Thank you.
Very good. Yeah. So maybe would you think something like on the Irvington Village or Irvington Village Police website would be a good place to do that? Or
I think so. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I think looking at our website, both the village and the police website is probably something on our list. So I mean, better communication is always important. Frank and I have talked about how some departments have used social media very well, like our friends to the north in Ossining, I think are great examples of, they're almost like a late night talk show host funny, but they get their messages across. So, I'm not going to make Frank be funny. I don't know if he is funny, but I call him cerebral already. So he's not getting funny too, not on the first call. But, I think that as we move on, we have to change the way we communicate as well. So, I mean, we've seen it just in the time I've been on the board, we don't do mailings anymore, and everything's now, almost all email or on the website or even social media. So I think we definitely understand that that's important, but, maybe some more basic information. We can't assume everyone is going to be familiar with our kind of type of law enforcement here. So that's a really interesting point, and I appreciate you speaking up tonight.
It would be helpful. I appreciate that as a member of the committee, and I would, if you have a moment, to just send over just a few topics that you think in particular would be helpful to cover in that. That would be much appreciated.
Yeah, I can definitely do that.
Great, thanks.
Especially now that you've kind of waded through the process, like what would have been helpful when you first got here,
Will do.
Thank you.
Actually, Larry, maybe we could send over, just put in the chat the email address where people could provide follow-up comments if they'd like.
Sure, yeah, I mean, I'll use my email address. It would make sense. Obviously, it'll get distributed unless you don't want it to go directly to our committee email, right?
Probably not, just
Yeah,
for practicality's sake.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'll put that in there.
Thanks.
Yeah, Kathy, I know you answered it on the Q&A, typing it, but maybe you just want to talk about the timing and the deadline or lack thereof of the surveys.
Yeah, so we deliberately didn't include a deadline for the survey because we wanted to make sure that we got had enough responses to be meaningful, and didn't want to close the survey if we didn't have that yet. So what I would say is that we'll probably announce. I would say that we'll probably announce within a 7-day period when we're going to be closing. And maybe then we'll send that out to folks through the community, through Brian's newsletter and through some village notifications, just to let everyone know that we're in the, but it will be relatively soon. So my guess is that it's the survey will probably close entirely, I would say, within probably about 14 days. So folks should be anticipating getting a note, a 7-day warning within a week from now. So we did deliberately leave it open because we wanted to make sure that we got enough people from all different demographics in the community, including young people. But if you haven't done it yet, I'd really appreciate your doing it. And if you would like to send it, share the link with others that you think might haven't noticed it, or share your postcard, that would be great too. So thanks.
Kathy, if it closes in 2 weeks, how long would it take to analyze the data? Because I guess I'm just concerned about making I would hope that recommendations would come out of the survey. So what's the timing for that, do you think?
I think we'll have, I think even if we use preliminary data for the analysis, I think we can do that and probably find that when we close the survey and have final data that the numbers won't change very much. So I anticipate that we can have the closed-end questions analyzed within about a week or less. And really so I think we can do that relatively very quickly of the time when we close the survey, or even when we decide that we're going to begin using preliminary data and doing an analysis. I think about a week can be done.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you for everything.
So we have a question from Michael Hanna in the chat.
Would you like me to read it?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to.
I think it sounds like he has multiple ones because it starts with question 1.
Yeah. I wonder, Michael, do you want to read your own question? Are you on? Maybe not. Okay, I'll read it. Question 1, as a resident, I favor supporting a more diverse police force and community. Do you have statistical information regarding the Westchester Police Academy? The annual graduation photo doesn't appear to be very diverse and so limits or restricts the pool of potential hires. Anyone want to take that on? That seems like a Mayo question.
Well, diversity is something that many departments are looking at. One of the issues is that when there, and it's a great question, because when there's a limit to the diversity that's coming out of the academy, then there's a limit to the number of diverse candidates that the departments can choose from. So in order to change that, we have to really engage in more community outreach, community engagement. Some of the things that we've discussed are, and not only for diverse candidates, but to increase the number of people we get that are interested in careers in law enforcement to begin with, is trying to engage with younger people, trying to engage with people in the community, and showing them how law enforcement can be a very rewarding and viable career, and also talking about the different aspects of law enforcement. So many people wouldn't realize that you could be involved in forensics. You might be able to go into the FBI, that all of these things are law enforcement, and that there's so many different aspects. So you can be, I'm a former prosecutor, you could be a DA, an assistant district attorney. There's so many different levels of law enforcement that most people are not aware of. So to the degree that we can take our community engagement obligation and have outreach so that we get more diversity across the board in every aspect that we can consider, then I think we'll be more effective. And that's something that that the county had looked at and is looking at right now. And it's also, I guess it's going to take an educational initiative. You can almost think of it the same way we do when we look at STEAM, where you traditionally didn't have the same number of women in science and technology. So we started to put more emphasis in making sure that we encourage them to pursue those careers. And now we have a lot of people are starting to really thrive, and you have more diversity in that arena. So it's going to be a similar effort that's necessary for us to increase the diversity across the board. And again, going back to the civil service laws, the New York State law, so it's not something we can solve on our own in Irvington or even in the county. It's going to require proposed state legislation to change those laws, to change the rules that allow us, or that right now really restrict our ability to find candidates we otherwise might really want to try to find. And Chief Cerrone talked about that very early on as an impediment. And it may be an opportunity for us to partner with larger police organizations, because from what I can see, at least, all of the police chiefs I've talked to are in favor of removing that restriction so that they have access to a wider pool of individuals.
I think too, I would like to see how many people are, the makeup of people who are signing up for the exam to start. And I think, any simple thing would be maybe waiving or vastly reducing the fee to sign up for the exam, as well as, offering prep classes, because, if you're not a good test taker, I look at it similarly with, the SATs or ACTs or anything like that. If you take a class to help you prepare for them, you're going to do better. And I think there's different communities have, different, means as well as, knowledge to even take those types of tests. And I think it's very similar for the police exam. I think since we've been talking about the topic, also once you're in the police department, you have to take exams to get promoted. So if you want to go from an officer to a sergeant, or a sergeant to a lieutenant, or a lieutenant to a captain, if there is such a thing, and then to chief. So, Frank has to pass the chief test now. It's not just appointed, so I think it's a similar, interesting, complicated system, not only from hiring, but also from promoting, and if someone's a bad test taker, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. I think the good thing is once you're in the police department, you have access to, I know in Irvington, we have access to an educational, stipend. So if you want to take the sergeant test, that's not going to be something that, money's not going to be, something that holds you up. Not having knowledge that there's a prep test is not going to be something that holds you up. So I think that's, all encouraging, but, I think getting people to take that exam, and I think Mayo's, it should be given every year in May or whatever it is. I understand that they want I think it's because people were paying $100 or $200 for an exam. You wanted to give them 3 to 5 years, but maybe if you waive the fee, you could do it every year. Or maybe you could have 2 tests or 2 list A and list B and list C over 3 years, because, the lists do get picked over too. So the lists now with COVID especially are almost 5 years old. So the people that haven't been hired, very often there's a reason, maybe something in their background or something like that. So, I think that one big piece of it, the civil service piece, is a piece that we can't solve, but we can, work towards solving it through police organizations, through, the other mayors in the river towns and Greenberg, and, maybe it's something we can, put some strong recommendations that we get other people to sign on. Mayo, I know we talked about that. But I think that it is a big piece of it. And I think, Michael, you're right. But I think the step back from, this is another misperception. It's something people just don't know. I told my wife this, that she thought you went to the academy, and then once you graduated from the academy, you applied for a job. It doesn't work that way. You get hired, and then the police department sends you to the academy. It's, it's not like, you go to an engineering school and then you become an engineer. It's someone wants to hire as an engineer, so they pay you to become an engineer. That's kind of how it works with the police department. So, so I think that maybe that, Michael, maybe you weren't aware of that, it's not that you just go to the academy and graduate and then apply for a job. It actually works the other way around. You get on the test, you get hired, and then, we pay for you to go through the academy. So that's something that not a lot of people knew about the process of it, that, it's not like you just apply like you're applying to a college. You have to be appointed basically to the police academy.
And that's another challenge that we face, because once you've paid for someone to go through the police academy, now you can't simply come and take that person away from that municipality. And I guess you can, but if you do, then you're liable for the cost of the training.
Yeah.
So you have the NYPD, for example, which was routinely losing its officers to places like Westchester and Nassau. And then they just started suing all the municipalities that took their probationary officers because they had paid. It was a contractual obligation. So there are a number of things that we can look at in terms of, again, how do you make people become interested? And a lot of it also goes back to perception about law enforcement. What is the job? Is it a job that people are going to want to take? And right now, it's a more difficult job to recruit people in the first place, just based on this particular period of time and the perception of law enforcement. So those are some things that we have to really work to try to counter right now across the board. We want to make sure that we still get people who would be the best candidates to be law enforcement to consider pursuing that as a career.
Yep. And I think it's interesting too, how you see so many families with multi-generations in law enforcement, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but they obviously gotten interested in it at an early age, and that is not inherently a bad thing. It's just, it is what it is. And I think you're right that we have to, I don't know if there's a advertising campaign, but I think the problem too is that you have all these villages, cities, and the county. Maybe we could all work together on some kind of shared services to talk about law enforcement, because there are so many different careers, like from aviation to patrol. It's a wide array of things you could be interested in. So, and Michael, I have promoted you now, so welcome aboard.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was very interesting. I particularly as you were just saying, the piece about the testing suddenly becomes more prominent. I see the photos. It's so great to see each year's graduating class, but then you were like, well, I know our communities is as a Westchester community is fairly diverse, and that doesn't seem reflected in the graduating class. So the step before that, you're saying, is the test, and so seems like somewhere needs to do some work to address that.
It's interesting, if you were to look at the graduating class for the Department of Corrections for Westchester County, it would be, I'd say, overwhelmingly Black and brown.
Yeah, I don't see those photos. Yeah.
Yep. But what's interesting is that the exams are not so drastically different that the pools couldn't really kind of, you couldn't get people from either going to the other. So sometimes it's an issue of outreach as well.
Is that something that the committee could look at? I see some of the, I've been able to listen to one or two of the meetings in part, and I see some of the recommendations are state recommendations to the state in terms of changes that could be made, or
Some of that would be, some of it would involve the state, but some of it is simply the individual municipalities themselves trying to have outreach within the community and being able to talk to the young people that are coming up through the community and saying, hey, listen, please consider this as a career. So it's an interesting dynamic, and I think that it requires a multifaceted approach. So we'd have to be able to look at it statewide, county, as well as local. And then the other thing that one of our officers who's on the committee, who's been tremendous, brought to our attention, just based upon his actual experience, is that, you know, if you look at the life of a police officer in a 4-year period of time, and you look at how many 4-year terms, quote unquote, would you expect to have before you start to think about retiring, you lose an opportunity to be promoted if the test is only given every, you know, if it's not given as more often. Because what happens is every 2 or 3 years, it makes it less likely that you're going to now become a lieutenant. It makes it less likely you're now going to become a captain. It makes it less likely, especially if you transfer to another department, that you're going to be a person who gets promoted. So by offering the exam more often, ideally, we'll be able to have those opportunities for upward mobility as well, and increase the pool of people that can become supervisors.
If you don't mind, could I just dig into that? Kick me off anytime, but that question about the responsibility of municipalities, because when I have asked the question in prior years of various folks who know this more than the regular citizen, it's the discussion around the civil service aspect is the challenge. But I'm learning tonight, it sounds like that there's much more that could be done in terms of recruiting potential folks. And so you're saying that that's at the level of Westchester communities, municipalities that could be doing this.
Well, we're looking at it, and that's more coming under the reimagining component of what are we able to do better so that we can go outside of what's traditionally been done to attract the best candidates to Irvington. And so we've done I just have to tell you, it's been a tremendous amount of effort from the members of the task force to look at different ways that we might be able to make a law enforcement career more attractive to people who have not traditionally pursued careers in law enforcement. So whether that's partnering with the school, maybe in a traditional way, or maybe exploring other ways that we might be able to work with law enforcement, with young people in a non-enforcement capacity, we're really trying to consider every way possible, and we're open to any suggestions, for us to consider further how we might be able to diversify that pool.
Yeah, so interesting. I would say as a resident, I would really encourage this committee to dig into that, because it seems like that's a critical aspect when we look at the ability to recruit people, that's not tapped into or addressed as adequately as it should be. But to pivot from what you were just saying, I did hear the committee discussing a recommendation around perhaps increasing the age of those that are hired to 25. I was just curious about the motivation for that.
We have not adopted that formally as a recommendation, so it's something that the committee is still looking at. But the committee has discussed the possibility of increasing also the age, so that we don't necessarily lose a person that might be a little bit older, but in every other way would be a great candidate to be a police officer.
Yes,
so that will give us a lot of options to not lose some people who would be great. So we haven't reached a final determination in terms of that, so it's something that we're still studying.
So I'm just curious, what's the motive for that recommendation, that potential recommendation?
In terms of the increase?
Yeah.
Of the minimum or the maximum?
Well, you just explained the maximum, so I'm curious about the minimum.
I think the minimum had to do with the maturity level of the officer coming in, but there was disagreement over that point of view.
Yeah,
So,
no, I did hear that part. So I'm just trying to I missed the part about why it was being suggested. So
yeah, it was related to maturity level, really, in terms of putting out officers that are mature. And again, there's still further discussion on that, I would say.
And it wasn't to suggest that somebody 21 can't be mature enough to be a great officer. We know that we have tremendous officers that are 21 all the time. It was looking at, you may be familiar with the Raise the Age process that went on in terms of how we treat children in the criminal justice system, recognizing that the mind is not fully developed until after 21 years old. And just looking at the fact that we're asking young people as police officers to go into situations which are difficult for anybody. And if they're doing it with a limited life experience and they're put into that situation, are we sometimes maybe doing a disservice to somebody who might be a great candidate a year, 2, 3 years later? So it's something that we're continuing to look at. And again, not every 40-year-old is going to be a great candidate to be a police officer either. So we understand that. But we recognize that, if The Rock comes in and says, hey, I want to be a police officer, chances are you could probably handle the physical component. So if he's an otherwise good candidate, if he's over 35, it shouldn't necessarily disqualify him.
Yeah.
Or her, as the case may be.
Well, I would suggest you could increase the maximum by quite a bit in terms of the level of fitness so many people have these days into their later years. But I guess just to dig into the minimum a little bit more, maybe this is a question for our police leaders in Irvington. Is every officer expected to be able to address every situation, or do certain people are more in terms of if we're worried about maturity, is there a way to hire people? And 90% of what I observe police officers doing are not necessarily addressing a violent or dangerous situation. There's so many other aspects to the role. Is there a way to bring people in where it's not necessarily being the expected to be the first person to break through a door or whatever that scenario is, where we're worried about how the young mind works. I think about other countries where police officers don't carry a weapon, for example. So more about, is there that, with our police officers, are they expected to do everything from the get-go, or, is there already sort of a natural evolution to the roles that officers have?
Well, there you'd be talking about maybe something similar to, for instance, in London, the community resource officers, which are not actually police officers, but they work with the police officers. And after 2 years of working in that capacity, then they're eligible to become police officers. So that's a different situation. But if you're a member of the police department, even in a place like Irvington, where we don't expect that you're going to have, a lot of violent crime, and you probably, ideally, you won't have to fire your weapon at all. We operate with the understanding that at any given moment you may have to do so. And so one of the things that we've discussed is making sure that all of the officers are as prepared as they could possibly be for any particular situation. I think if we didn't do that, we probably would be doing a disservice to the officer and ultimately to the community.
Right. But I think, just to step back to what you're just saying about that community advisor role, I guess the expectation is the moment we say it's a police officer, they should be able to handle violent situations with reciprocal force or appropriate force. But obviously we don't expect that of everybody so there is perhaps a potential for younger people who are worried about, in certain contexts, to not be put in that role. So perhaps there's, for reimagining, there's the need to reimagine. We want to bring more people in. We want to bring people in who are interested. We don't want to lose those younger folks. I think those are great points. Somebody who's been in the military, and we know so many people in the military are not, just like in the police force, are never, engaged in anything related to violence or violent situations. So I just wonder, in this discussion, where I would really appreciate hearing both sides of the different aspects of the conversation about why to increase the age, why we don't want to lose people, the reimagining opportunities for people working in our communities that don't necessarily, you know, and it's, you know, when we hear about these terrible situations like in Syracuse where, you know, giving people who will, if we create a new role that is affiliated with the community and the police department and give someone the opportunity to become a police officer, but is more about the other aspects of serving and supporting a community before they take on all those responsibilities that a police officer has. Perhaps that's the way to have that middle ground where we're not blocking out the 21 to 25-year-olds, but finding something that helps them develop their emotional intelligence as they deal with the community before they take on the more sober responsibilities that the police officers have.
I would say, you know, for a place like Irvington to have almost like a second tier probably wouldn't work because we only have, you know, kind of 22 sworn officers total. I think where you see it is in like the county, they have the park ranger program where, you know, it's typically going to be 18 to 25-year-olds that probably want a job in law enforcement, will work in the summer at, you know, Playland or Tibbetts Park or that type of thing. And they get, you know, real kind of hands-on. They work with the county police, but they're not full police officers. You know, so I think that's kind of along the lines of what you're saying, Michael. I don't think it's a bad idea, but, you know, in Irvington to have like, you know, 3 or 4 people that aren't interchangeable as police officers, I think it would kind of blow up the budget in a lot of ways. You know, I can't see a way that we could, you know, practically do it where, you know, I think the closest we have are kind of parking enforcement officers. If we had, you know, a younger person that wanted to do that and maybe crossing and that, you know, was interested, maybe was going to college and that sort of thing, we could probably do that. But I think hiring kind of a full-time, you know, 23-year-old that would kind of play a support role wouldn't probably work in our budget as currently crafted anyway, you know.
Right. I guess that's something that I haven't been able to see. How do the shifts work out? So with the 22, all of them are, there's a handful that are on duty at any given time. Is that how it works? Or
you mean with the county, with the
village?
With the parking enforcement officer, I think they work varied shifts. I think we have, well, the crossing guards work, I think 2, 3
I
hours.
was talking about the 22 officers you're citing. Like,
they
you're
work
saying
12.
you're saying that none of them, all of them need to be
correct.
Have
like
the full roles and responsibilities of a police officer because they're. And I guess I don't understand how the shifts work.
They work 12-hour shifts. There's typically overnight. There's only going to be like 3 guys. Frank, you might want to address it.
Yeah, absolutely. So pretty much we work 12-hour shifts, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And the minimum staffing is 3 officers assigned to duty. So 1 officer would be assigned to the desk and 2 officers assigned to road patrol. And at any given time, it could be any mixture of people working based on scheduling, vacation, somebody's out sick. So every officer has to be prepared in every instance to answer any call. So they all have to be trained at the same level. Now, you know, there are areas where people get trained in different things that they're, you know, get a little bit more training in special categories. But in the general, for patrol, everybody has to be trained to a certain level that could handle anything that might come across, you know, in a given shift.
That being said, though, Mr. Hanna, I think that what you're proposing is interesting. We can certainly consider it further. And even if it doesn't necessarily, and I'm not saying that there's no way it can, but even if it's not something that necessarily works well for Irvington individually, we do explore shared services. We look at ways that we might be able to work with other municipalities. And there's a possibility that we may make a state recommendation, which could end up being something along the lines of a community resource officer, which would give somebody an opportunity to start a career in law enforcement without necessarily having to be a full-fledged police officer. So there are a number of things we can consider. And if you have any additional proposals or anything concrete, or if you think of something else, please feel free to share that with us.
Yeah, well, obviously you can tell that I have limited understanding as just a regular citizen, but I just in these two questions, what I would suggest to you as a committee, and I've heard other people talk about it when I listen to the committee, is that we can't approach reimagining policing as Irvington being its own unique circumstance. Obviously, we're connected to our surrounding community of and larger Westchester. And so with these two questions in terms of who are police officers and what and the age and the gender and diversity and experience and all the different things that can help continue to improve policing and better reflect our community. It seems like those two pieces we were just talking about need to be looked at in terms of how can Westchester and the communities that have police forces that are within it work together to create those structures. Because as the mayor has said, Irvington can't do it on its own. It doesn't have the budget or the staffing level or the population. But clearly, these are things that feed into the police force that we do have. So I think I would really ask the committee to look into these aspects that we're just discussing over the last 15, 20 minutes, because it seems really critical to, rather than making a recommendation that would potentially not make a change or make a radical change that might limit the number of folks that we recruit, I think that you might want to look at solutions that increase the range of people that are recruited and give them opportunities to grow into the role, just as like you were saying. And clearly Irvington can't do that by itself. So I would suggest and hope that the committee looks at that sort of, let's build capacity, not limit it.
Thank you very much.
I'm glad I didn't make you type all that, Michael.
Yeah, thank you. That's a lot. And now can I talk for a half hour about sidewalks, or is that another discussion?
Only 5 minutes. That's all we have left.
Oh, we're running out. Anyways, thank you everyone for doing what you're doing. I so appreciate it. And I have had a chance to follow on Facebook when you have these discussions. So thank you for being so transparent about it. And I know people, as they catch on about the work and they might find it at different times, have that now the opportunity to circle back and learn a lot about the process that you've been going through. And so thank you for committing the time. And I love the range of opinions and the constructive dialogue that you're having, and I appreciate that this process is occurring. So thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Be well.
Well, I guess I'll just ask everyone to complete their survey if they haven't done it yet. I don't know if Larry, if you can put a link to the survey in the chat, although my guess is the 12 attendees here were probably preaching to the choir. But just in case there's one or two who haven't yet, if you can find it in the next.
I did put it in the chat. I can put it in again if that would help.
Perfect.
Yeah, I must have missed it go by. Yeah. Thanks.
Dale, I wondered, when you think about it, all 200, I think that's the number of jurisdictions are going to submit these reports by April 1st. And I know the state is in bad financial state, but has there been any talk about making grants available to police departments so people could implement some of these ideas?
Probably going to depend on how much money they get from the federal government.
Yeah. So if the stimulus comes through, maybe there would be money available, because all these ideas sound so great, but if there's not going to be money to implement them.
Some of them probably won't cost very much. It's just a question of using the resources we already have a little bit differently. There will be some money that's clearly tied to doing the report and doing the work. But I think that if we get enough people, for instance, the changes to the civil service doesn't cost anything. Well, it'll cost a little bit. It'll be the cost of taking the exam again, but I'm sure that the fee for taking the exam can offset that cost. So there are a lot of opportunities for us to get a lot accomplished right now. And I'm optimistic. I tend to think that even some of what we're looking at won't be really ready to be implemented right away to begin with, because it's going to require legislative changes. So that'll take a year probably. And then once that happens, hopefully the economy is better than it is right now. And they're also talking about infrastructure. So that would create actually a lot of jobs, and it'll create a lot of money. So, tax dollars. But I'm not the one who has to run a village or a town. So I would defer to Brian and Larry to give us more information. I just have to make sure that my kids are fed and that
Yeah.
If Latimer doesn't run again, we want you, Mayo.
There you go.
Be careful what you ask for.
I could be okay. Yep. I guess we'll make one final request for any last words on the night. We really picked up steam, like you said, man.
It was, I thought, really good feedback, interesting perspectives.
I just want to say that actually, as far as feedback and perspectives, the Michael Hanna's comments were interesting because I know as a committee we struggled with the community resource officers question, and we didn't come to any type of resolution, and maybe we'll talk about it. But it's interesting. It's an interesting perspective for sure.
It is, and there may be some models. Again, we talked about possibly some things that we might do as a Rivertown entity, and maybe that's something where we can do that and we can get buy-in. But we, again, it's something that won't happen overnight, but we can certainly start to talk about it and explore it. And if the group decides it's something we want to pursue, then we can talk to our neighbors about maybe trying to do that, or maybe a Greenberg wide, what have you. But there's definitely, in my estimation, a benefit there. And I know Greenberg was able to do the auxiliary police department, but it's a much larger community. But if we were to look at partnering as shared services, there may be great opportunities to do that. And I know that the auxiliary police were volunteer, so there was really not a significant cost there. If anything, we actually got a lot more back than whatever the nominal cost was. And if that's a pathway to becoming a police officer, it may be something we want to explore, because then it gives the department an opportunity to kind of monitor a person and see how they interact with the community, gives them a chance to learn the community and to get the skills and maybe even participate in the training, before they actually carry a weapon. So there's a lot to consider.
It still comes back to that test, and we need to get younger kids to take the test and get them help in taking the test and expand on who is taking the test.
Yep. I mean, maybe it's talking to guidance counselors too about, talking to kids and letting them know it's available.
Absolutely. I think that we should try to revisit the participation from the school district. Just ideally, if we can make sure we have somebody at each meeting, it would be great. Because I think that the possibility of partnering with them, and it doesn't have to necessarily be in the school, but to take advantage of their knowledge of the student body, at least, to find ways that we can interface with the kids, could be a great opportunity for the students that might be interested in becoming police officers. But it also is just good in terms of community engagement.
We have two hands up. So let's start with Govert, and then we'll go to Michael Hanna again.
Typical. It's past 9 o'clock, and all of a sudden I've got something to say. But
first time we had two hands up.
Having benefited from living in London for 20 years before I came to the US, I just wanted to advise against cherry picking one role in the London police office and evaluating whether that is feasible to be implemented in a US environment, because you cannot see it separate from the other roles in the London police force and the role that the London police force plays in the London communities. That there are distinct differences between how American police and British police is organized and what is expected of them as well. And I just wanted to mention that, having been on the receiving end of that for 20 years, because it is really apples versus oranges, and we shouldn't be focusing in on one specific role that we seem to like in the London police force without taking into account the wider picture.
And thank you very much, sir. With respect to the community resource officers, we already were doing that in the United States and in New York State. We were calling them, well, we were doing some of it, not all of it necessarily, but we were calling them the auxiliary police officers. So it was something that's already been done. And the question really was, to what degree might we be able to either re-implement it or to expand upon it? But we do appreciate your perspective. And I just, for my edification, what were some of the perceived, if you're comfortable answering this, what were some of your perceived differences in the way that policing is done in London versus, let's say, in New York?
Wow, that is probably a conversation that we're not going to finish between now and half past the hour. So I think that the main difference has obviously been mentioned. London or British police force do not carry weapons,
right.
And that really is a distinct difference in how you start to approach. Or not, maybe not even approach, but it gives a distinct difference in your position as a police agent in your engagement with the community, where in the United Kingdom, police officers need to 100% rely on being able to engage with members of the community, because they don't have the stick that is a weapon. Having said that, what people tend to forget is that definitely for the Metropolitan Police in London, they have a huge a number of weapons carrying officers who get involved in some of the more violent crime, and therefore the whole police force is not without weaponry. It's what we call the bobbies on the beat, the people that you see in the films walking the streets that don't carry weapons. But there is a section of the London police force that certainly do. I think that's one of the main differences. I'll add to that the community, the CROs in London were probably not the big success that people were hoping it would be, because they did quickly become regarded as a second-tier police officer. And obviously, once you are pushed into that category, it is really difficult to assert yourself and to really provide a meaningful contribution to that overall community relationship building that the police was hoping to do through these CROs.
Great. Well, thank you very
much.
Yeah.
Michael Hanna with the last word.
Thank you. With the nick of time, unmute. So, yeah, I just had a question. If I know there's some former school board members and some parents, but there's no formal participants from the school district on this group, is there?
We had the high school principal for one meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
the meeting schedules proved to be somewhat difficult.
Right.
And we did get a bit of a late start with them. So we have had attendance, not necessarily at these public meetings that you're seeing broadcast, but we have kind of working group subcommittee meetings, and they have participated in some of those. So it hasn't been as much as we'd like, but it's not,
There's technically 4 members. I think there's 4 members. I think they're all from the administration. Is that right, Larry?
Yeah, as I recall. Yep.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that there was that attempt, and I'm sorry that the schedules are proving challenging. But I would just say the couple of things I've heard at the couple meetings I've heard, and even a little bit here, that just as I recognize that I have a lot to learn to understand how policing works in our community, I would just ask this committee to be very careful about making any recommendations related to the police's relationship with the school district if they don't have that strong integration right now with this group.
One thing maybe you can help us with, Michael, is if we discuss the SROs, if Mr. Harrison could be, Dr. Harrison could be there for that meeting. instead
Yeah, I
of
mean,
talking
you'd have to reach out to him, but I would suggest that, you know, you would want far more engagement than a meeting around SROs, because that's not been broached in this community. So that would be a whole new topic
Thank you very much.
with a number of complexities related to it.
Yeah, I think Michael, you're making a really good point. And there's, you know, we have one, you know, basically one question on the survey on this topic, and it's such a deep and complex topic that involves, and there's, you know, I'm sure also, you know, history we're not taking account of, and a lot to consider. And I think I think that whatever this committee does, it will just be sort of the beginning of that conversation, and nowhere near the end. You know, I think that it's really almost an undertaking as large as what we've already done. So I think I appreciate your making that point.
And I would just add that I am aware that, you know, the district has met numerous times with the Irvington Police over the last few years, as well as the Tarrytown Police. So I think there is that relationship, and that's the place to build off in terms of it. And I know when there's been concerns about security, Irvington Police have been great about, you know, patrolling more, or having police cars present as deterrents, those sorts of things. And then additionally, the district is in the process of, it has a security consultant that it works with, and added a security professional who works with several districts, including Irvington, as well as has several $1 million in projects right now related to security. So there's a lot going on in the school district related to safety and security. And so from what I'm hearing, I'm thinking this committee, while there was an opportunity, that opportunity is not present at this time in relationship to the school district, is what I would share.
Well, thank you for your input. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think that'll be our last question for tonight. Unless anybody has anything they want to say to wrap up, but otherwise, I appreciate all of you giving us a couple hours tonight, and keep on working hard. We're getting towards the end of the first stage.
Right.
Good night, everyone.
Yes, be well, everybody. Have